Sounds good. Walking on the house down there, Denver Point, sometimes I don't hear it ringing where I'm at, so.
Oh, yeah, no, I'll leave a message.
Okay, sounds good, thank you.
What was the other one you were talking about? Sharpness or what?
Wasabi.
Oh, wasabi, now that sounds good.
I think it's called something else now, but it used to be Wasabi, and it's across from Walmart.
Okay, it's close enough to 7. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Wanted to welcome everybody. My name is Phil Lilly. I am the president of Branson Trout Limited, and we have Dwayne Doty and Morgan Wyatt here that are also officers. As of right now, we have no board, so tonight we're gonna go ahead and open it up. Shane Bush and Clint Hale are here to talk to you about the trout. The study they did and any questions you have about the hatchery, but we wanted to go ahead and take care of business before we get started with them. Before I get started, we have Bob Randall from the Missouri Trout Fishers Association out of Springfield here tonight. And as some of you probably know, they're trying to start a group down here in Branson. So if anybody's interested in helping with that, Bob's in the back. Talk to him afterwards about that. I know they had a meeting here on the 1st.
Yes.
September.
Yes, the next will be the 2nd of October.
2nd of October.
I'm sorry, you just corrected me, it's the 4th.
4th? You have the Lions Club? Good. Okay. All right. And also we have some people here from the Ozark Fly Fishers group out of St. Louis. They're down for a weekend of fishing, and they found out about the meeting tonight, so they came to offer their expertise. They're an old established group out of St. Louis, and garner a lot of respect in the state for what they've done for trout fishing. So if you see any of those guys around, introduce yourself and get acquainted. So what I wanted to do is open it up for the floor up for nominations for president, vice president, treasurer, secretary. Right now, and we have a president, a treasurer, and a secretary. And I haven't asked them if they want to stay on. But they are welcome to. If there's anyone else that want to nominate themselves or somebody else to do that, they're more than welcome to. And besides those 4 positions, we need at least 3 or 4 board members. I feel like to really have a good representation of the chapter, and because I think we have enough issues down here that need to be addressed that I think the chapter is needed down here, but maybe not. You know, I'm not here to say one way or the other. So it's really up to the people in the community that want to spend the time organizing and working in the chapter, because you know, as you know, in any organization there's only a small percentage of the people do all the work. So anyhow, yes sir.
I have a question. How was notice given out about this meeting? Because I didn't get anything.
If you're a member of the Branson Trout, or the Branson chapter of Trout Unlimited, they have what they call membership tools through their site, and everybody that's listed as a Branson chapter member, you're supposed to have your email registered to you and that kind of thing. I sent out a broadcast email through their thing. I know Morgan didn't get one either, and she's the secretary. So that and just social media is the only 2 ways, without spending any money and doing any kind of mailing, which would be the same, probably a little bit more reliable than an email. But
my email address is out there. I got
right.
emails before, but I sure didn't get one this time.
Yeah.
Haven't got one for years.
Well, the chapter hasn't been viable for years, so that's the reason why you haven't been getting any, but as far as the last time, you know, I can talk to the guys at National and say, you know, I have people that, and several people that tell me that they didn't get an email.
Is it up to them to do it?
Well, no, I sent the email out through their, see, they have the list of all the emails, I don't have them. And so I send it out through their leadership tools, is what they call it in their website. And
But shouldn't they provide you with a list of members and
Yeah,
addresses?
I can ask, you know,
I think
they,
would.
you'd think they would, I can ask and see if they will do that, and then I can use or whoever wants to do it, can use Constant Contact. Go ahead and put those emails into our own email database, and then we'd be probably a little bit, well, we'd be responsible to send out our own emails.
As it should be.
It should be, but I gotta check and make sure that that's what they would allow.
Why wouldn't?
I wouldn't either, but,
I got the email from you,
okay,
but does this chapter have a Facebook page?
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Because another member, I'm with Mako Fly Fishers out of Joppa,
Mhm.
and another member put it on our web page about the meeting.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, it does have Facebook. I don't know how many members are on that page, but, I mean, we definitely need to do a better job once we get going, and we need a better job of communicating. And again, that if somebody wants to step up and take that by the reins, we'll part to them. Any other questions about the chapter? Okay, do I have any nominations for president?
Phil Lilly.
Thank you.
I second it.
You're not a member, right?
No, I can't.
Oh.
But I'm a member of Trout Unlimited in St. Louis.
Okay, all right. That's
Hey,
fine.
Phil, Phil, could you, I'm not a member yet,
Uh-huh.
but what does a good TU group do? I mean,
It's basically, when we formed this chapter back in the early '90s, there was a lot of concern with anglers and business owners about, you know, the condition of the lake and how it was managed, and there was talk about creating a trophy area on the upper lake, and it was formed mainly for a public voice, that we all could speak all together and make our concerns known. We ended up working with MDC directly in coming up with the regs for the upper end and for the management area, and see, it was passed in '95, but it wasn't implemented until '97. So the chapter, I think, started around '91, '92. So we worked with them for a couple, 3 years before anything was drafted. And I know that there's guys here that can speak to concerns about, you know, the lake now, and the shoring up of the bank on just below the dam. You know, every time we have a high water event, we get more and more bank erosion on this side, and that's a concern. You know, that's something we can address. I know MDC knows about it and is aware of it too, but, you know, if we can put pressure on, maybe come up with some funds to help, you know, something, and get something done in that direction. There might be some other things. I'm sure there's other things. The chapter in Tulsa, they work with public schools in putting cold water aquariums in classrooms, and they are supplied with eggs and fertilized eggs, and they, in the classroom, get to watch trout hatch and go through the, you know, they have a program there, and it's all through TU, and I have all the information to get that started here if wanna start that here. I mean, there's a lot of things TU can do if they wanna do it. And, but that's what I would think our chapter would do, or what it would be all about. You know, if the MTFA wanna start a group down here and excuse me if I'm way off base, but if it's more of a social group to get together, tie flies, that kind of thing, I think it's needed in this community. I don't see that as I don't see Trout Unlimited as doing that necessarily, being the only thing that they do. I think it's more of a, you know, working with the powers that be to better our lake, better the trout fishery. Now, it's not just Lake Taneycomo though. We really, you know, if there's other cold water fisheries around here that need attention, and we ought to speak to that too. We shouldn't just be Lake Taneycomo. But there has been some talk at the district, I'm sorry, at the regional level and at the national level about making this chapter a Springfield/Branson chapter, and try to get more people in Springfield involved. I think they're thinking more of there's a bigger population base up there that TU could draw from. We put feelers out with Bob's chapter and the other chapter up in Springfield, and there wasn't really any interest. But that's not to say that we could have meetings in Springfield and draw more people from Joplin and other areas that may want to attend a TU meeting. That was, you know, I tried several meetings in Springfield back in the early 2000, I forget when it was, and it really didn't go over very well. I think we had a lot more people down here that attended the meetings and didn't go to Springfield, and we didn't have a lot of people that in the Springfield area that attended the meeting. So I don't know if that's a direction that we should go. So, does that answer your question? Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay, Carolyn, we just nominated you as president, so. You're late. When you're not here, you get nominated.
Don't come in here and carry.
Actually, Carolyn was, you know, she was a vital part of the chapter for many, many years. And she, you know, they kept it going when I stepped out. So, you know, really appreciate the job that Carolyn and Stan did and others at that time back then. All right. Any other nominations for president? Don't be shy. Vice president. Right now it's Dwayne Doty.
You know if he's interested.
I'll gladly give it up.
You said something here. I didn't know.
I'm not gonna do pointing. You can point all night.
I said,
but-
no,
Huh?
I don't have the time.
Okay.
Maybe
Maybe in a year.
Maybe after 62
Maybe in a
next
year.
year, yeah.
Well, I nominate Ronnie Quinn.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Treasurer. Right now it's Morgan Wyatt. Oh wait. You're secretary.
That's the last I heard.
Okay. Sorry. I had to write it down. Any nominations for treasurer? It's open.
How about Mike
Mike.
Marriott?
Mike Marriott.
Mike? Secretary. I hear a no. Okay, Morgan? Okay, I'm not gonna, I think we ought to limit the board members to 5 additional. Anybody have a problem with that? You wanna go more? I was gonna say less, but, you know, I don't wanna.
5 additional?
Yeah,
How many are there
none.
Just a total of 5.
Well, 5 in addition to the 4 were just mentioned.
They're not board members, they're officers.
But what does the charter say about officers being on the board?
We are, I'm sorry, officers are board members. Most of the time, from what I've seen, and I know Ozark Fly Fishers is the same way, within the board, you can create duties, like somebody could be in charge of the social or communications, somebody could be in charge of banquets, fundraising, someone could be membership, education, the list goes on and on. Now, and I'm not saying that we should do that, but that's something that we can look at. So, board members.
I'll volunteer.
How do you spell your last name?
OEHLER.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay,
So they have to be a current member to nominate them?
run out and join after the meeting, no, that's fine. We won't vote until next month.
Okay.
Scott, SWOPE.
Can you do a lot of the board meetings, business by email instead of having to make the trip down there?
We do it on the regional level. We have conference calls, and actually on the regional level, we hardly ever meet, maybe once a year. So most of them are done, conference calls.
What you plan for here?
It depends, I guess, on the board members. If we have a lot of people out of town, then we'll probably have to do something like that. If we don't, if they're all local, then we'll meet for lunch or something if we can do that. I mean, and we can mix it up too. If we have somebody from Springfield, then we can try to accommodate them the best we can and have conference calls. But it really depends, I guess, on what we'd have to cover. If it's something pretty extensive or we're starting something, we try to get together for an evening, get together and hash it out. So
Is
either
this a
or.
one-year commitment, or is the board for multiple years? And how was the frequency of the meetings? He wants to know, and that's a very good question. You probably don't know the answer to that.
No, I really don't. I assume the board positions are probably at least 2 years, maybe 3. You know, I'd have to look at the charter, and to tell you the truth, I haven't looked at the charter in a long time. But I know that the board would be free to change the charter if we needed to accommodate, if we want to go longer or go shorter terms. Usually there's a maximum of terms, like 2 or 3 terms, and then you have to be off for a year and then come back on. I know that in the officer situation, there's limits, and should be, like in president, vice president. But I'll tell you, at the meeting next month, I'll brush up on all that and let you know.
Is the charter like in a PDF format where you could email it out to people?
I'm sure it is.
I'll nominate Gary Hallwell for the board.
You probably could find it by going on the TU website.
can get that.
Gary Hollowell, our board member.
Hollowell?
Yep.
Howard's jumping on this.
Somebody got to Aaron Hawkins.
Howard? Hawkins?
How many you got now?
4. Mark, Scott, Gary, and Howard.
That's probably enough to fill to start with.
Dennis will volunteer.
I was told I gotta volunteer.
Yes.
I like to help out where I can, but schedule gets tight. Okay.
Sure, and that's why we have lots to, you know. What's your last name, Dennis?
Mel, M-O-U-T.
Okay. We have 5. Okay. I don't wanna take up any more of your time. Get these guys and, let them do their presentation, and I know you guys got a lot of questions and comments, so. You ready? Sure. Thanks.
Hello, my name's Shane Bush. I'm the fisheries management biologist for Lake Taneycomo and Table Rock down here. My office is at the hatchery. Clint Hale in the back of the room, he's going to talk a little bit as well. He's our hatchery manager here at Shepherd. So I'm going to go over just the status of what the fish population looks like in Taneycomo now, based on our most recent sampling. Talk about the regulations Phil was talking about and how those have worked. We'll talk a little bit about last year's high water event and how that all came down to what happened here in the hatchery as well as in the lake. Kind of hopefully give you all a better understanding of why it happened and how it happened. And then Clint's going to give you kind of an update of what happened here at the hatchery during that event. And then we'll stick around as long as you want to answer questions, kind of talk about the future forecast for next year. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the background. I know a lot of you all know this lake probably much better than me. I got down here in 2008. I've been the biologist here since. But Taneycomo was first stocked in 1958, right after it was flooded. Table Rock was built. At one point, they were stocking 1.6 million. That wasn't allowing for any room for growth. The fish were getting over harvested. You'll kind of see through these slides. And around 1992, they came down to around that 700,000 mark, and that's where we've stayed. Based on some studies we've done, that seems to be about optimal for optimal growth and survival of fish in our trophy area. Brown trout first stocked in 1980. Big push of them, 50 to 70,000 to start out, and now we're back down to about 10,000. The past 3 to 4 years, we've stocked 15,000, trying to replenish fish that we lost in 2011. I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So now we stock 700,000 rainbows a year and 10,000 brown trout a year. 450,000 of those, maybe, right, Clint, come from Shepherd of the Hills?
475, yeah. Sorry.
Those all come from Shepherd of the Hills. The others come from Neosho National Fish Hatchery as part of the mitigation for turning Lake Taneycomo into cold water fishery. You can see, based on this graph, from January to December, we stock higher in the summer months when we have higher angling pressure. And based on our creel surveys we've done, this coincides very well with the amount of angling pressure out there as well as the amount of fish that people catch throughout the year. So we want to have more fish in the system when there's more people wanting to fish for them. Our trout sampling takes place every summer, typically in August. We just completed our last sample on the 18th of August this year. The upper 3.5 miles of the lake is where we do all of our sampling. You may wonder how we can make presumptions of the rest of the lake based on only sampling trout here, but again, based on the creel survey that we conducted back in 2008, 2009, I compared the data of the fish anglers caught above the special regulation area and below it. Those matched up almost exactly with the size structure of the fish that we're seeing in our samples. I mean, as soon as we get below Fall Creek, it's a put and take fishery, and you'll see the graphs that I'm going to put up here in a minute. So gives us a really good representation of what's going on, a snapshot, if you will. And we catch a lot of trout in just one night sampling. The regulations went into effect in 1997, the special regulations of 12 to 20 inch slot on rainbows. There's a lot of numbers on this graph, and I don't have a pointer, but 1996, the total number of fish we were catching per hour of electrofishing of rainbow trout was only 23 per hour. In 2016, we're catching 243 per hour in that same stretch. So we've increased tenfold. In the regulation area, it's bumped up, and also in the non-regulation area below it, the number of fish and the size of fish have all improved as a result of this slot limit that we put in. So this year, numbers looked really great. I was really pleased to see 25% of the rainbows that we sampled in the regulation zone were over 16 inches. That's phenomenal. So really happy with the way the fish look, the size of the fish, and the condition. You'll also see the numbers jumped up of fish size below the regulation area as well. There's a lot of information on this graph, but point your attention, these are link frequency graphs. This is what we take our electrofishing data, put it on graph form so we can see the size structure. So 0 to 24 inches on the rainbows. The blue lines indicate the slot limit. So this is a special regulation area. You see where most of our fish lie in that 12 to 18 inch mark. Some squeaking up to 20. Below the management zone, you can see once a fish gets to about 12 inches, it's not staying down there very long. Many of you may be, or probably know many catch and keep trout fishermen, and that's what that's designed for. That's why we stock so many. That's why we have the regulation zone to protect a portion of those to grow to larger sizes, and it really is working. Again, 63% of the fish in the regulation zone over 13 inches, and 25% over 16 inches. So, and this bottom graph shows you from 1996 to present. This purple line is the catch rates of all sizes of fish. So you can kind of see a trend and almost a plateau, since about 2010 of where we are now. So we feel like the stocking we're doing now is working. The catch rates of bigger fish have kind of rose and plateaued as well. Brown trout, in 2011, I mentioned a little bit before, we had some pretty poor water quality. That equated to poor water quality in Taneycomo, as well as poor water quality coming to the hatchery. Brown trout don't do really well in warm water. Warm water holds a lot more parasites, so reproduction of brown trout in that facility here was very low. So the fish that we stocked, we didn't get really good survival on. And so you see this gap, from 12 to 18 inches in 2011. We're missing those fish that we should have, go growing through the system. So that's why we stocked. We went from 10,000 to 15,000 starting in 2011, 12. You can see now we've got fish of all sizes, all the way up to above 20 inches, which is the minimum length limit. Fish, I'm sure you'd agree, if you've been out fishing this year, the brown trout look really great. They're fat and happy. So the brown trout have rebounded. 89% of the brown trout we caught in our sample this year were over 13 inches. 36% of them were over 16 inches. That's some pretty good fish to go out and catch and release. So harvest, based on our creel surveys, very minimal. The reason you don't see brown trout above 20 inches isn't because people are keeping them. It's just that, they're probably getting harder to find, harder to catch. They're harder for us to catch. We try not to, if we did our electrofishing in November, I think I'd see more, but the dissolved oxygen is so low, we don't want to take the risk of stressing those fish out. So that's why we do it in August. We probably see bigger fish later throughout the fall, but we got to hit it before that DO really starts to drop. So, but anyway, the brown trout are looking really good. 5% of the fish we caught were over 20 inches, so there are some trophies out there. The triploid brown trout program, this is a project that we're working on several different waters around the state: Taneycomo, North Fork of the White, and Current, or 11 Point?
Current River.
So what they basically did, and Clint can tell you more about this than me if you're interested, these fish are bred without reproductive organs, essentially. The thought is to put that energy that they would put to reproduction into growth, which we feel like they are doing, and I'll show you why here in a minute. So there's about 14,000, give or take, in the lake right now. We're done with this program. This was just a 4-year project. We didn't have any to stock in 2016 because of everything that happened last winter. But you can see length frequency graphs from 2014, 15, and 16, and you can kind of see those fish growing, getting bigger. Now we've got fish over 20 inches that are triploid. And relative weight, that is essentially body condition when I talk about the fish being fat and happy. 100, of course, is the best. You can see that blue line. The red represents rainbow trout, and this is another graph over time from 1993 to the present. Typically, we're running between 89 and a little over 100 on the relative weights of rainbows. Pretty good. Brown trout continue to stay well above 100. Body condition is great. As you all probably know from seeing it, there's a ton of food out there for them, so they survive and do very well. I just threw this graph up here to give you an idea of just one of the details when we think about stocking and how many we stock. The red indicates the relative weight, and the blue indicates how many we stocked per year. And you can see this inverse relationship. The more we stock, the more the body condition goes down. So, you know, we know 10 to 15,000 is a good number to keep those fish very healthy. That's what we stick to. And this is some sampling data from this year. So this is the length of some triploid brown trout that we captured, the weight, the relative weight. What I want to point out is the 2 biggest brown trout we caught this year were triploids, 6.8 pounder and a 9.3 pounder. If you see the relative weights, over 150 on both of those fish compared to diploids of comparable size. I don't know if you can see it down below all this stuff, but a 5.6 pound diploid fish is only about 118 on the relative weight and body condition. So that's why it seems like when these fish are getting to these mature sizes, they're not putting that energy into reproduction. It looks like they're putting it towards growth. It'd be really interesting to see how this shakes out. Like I said, we're done stocking them. We'll kind of watch these fish grow throughout the next 5-10 years and just see what comes of it. If you catch one, you can identify them because they're missing their adipose fin, that fin right above their tail on their back. We've clipped those, that's how we identify them. That's the only fin on a fish that won't grow back. So you might be thinking you've caught one, and that's why it was missing it. And so a lot of you are aware too, back in 2011, we used some funding from the Table Rock Lake National Fish Habitat Initiative project to install some boulder clusters in the upper end of the lake. From what I understand, and just observationally, looks like these have created some scours behind them, which is what they were designed to do. So be aware those are out there and could provide some good fish holding structure when they're running a little bit of water. Okay, the fun stuff. It's 2015 is the blue line. You can see from January to December. This is Table Rock Lake's graph, so 915 is normal pool. You can see what happened in about July. After several spikes before that, big inflow of fish in big inflow of water in July caused several problems. And then we won't even talk about what happened in December. If you can see on the far right corner of the graph, an anomaly that has never happened. What we started seeing, starting about end of July in Table Rock, was fish started floating. Started getting reports of dead fish, all species, all sizes. These fish started dying all the way up the White River, and it slowly, progressively worked its way down the lake, kind of working its way out of the Kings and the James. It's best to picture a lake, and I'm going to show you an animation that's going to help you understand a little bit more, but you know, as they generate more and more water, they generate more of that deeper oxygenated water out. So with that high water in 2015, they ran water all year. I mean, I don't know if the generators ever stopped. From my observation, it didn't. I'm sure you thought the same. And you'll see why that affected this. What we had was fish getting trapped in these deeper layers of oxygenated water. I'll explain a little bit more, but Last report I got was in September, probably about 3,000 fish is what I counted. Not anything population-wise that we're gonna observe a difference in Table Rock, but something worth noting anyway. A lot of the fish look like this bass. He's coughed up his swim bladder. Why would a fish do that? Well, he suffocated, he had no oxygen. A lot of these fish in the summertime will sit in that really deep layer of oxygenated water. And Table Rock, being such a deep lake, is really unique in that once the thermocline sets up, you still have a little bit of oxygen below that thermocline. So thermocline usually sets up 20, 30 foot. 2015 it set up about 20 or shallower. Below that, 20 foot down to about 100 foot, we had no oxygen, zero. From about 100 foot to 160 foot, there was a layer of 5 to 6 parts per million starting in July. So picture that wedge getting pulled through the dam at 140 foot into Taneycomo, and as that dissipates, those fish that are down there can't get to the surface because there's this 80-foot layer of anoxic water. And that's why we see these fish floating around. You combine that with water temperatures over 90 degrees last summer, you can see this green nasty stuff in the bottom right corner. Planktonic algae started to bloom. When that stuff dies, it uses oxygen. So fish in the upper water column were affected as well, not just the ones down deep. So everything kind of came together to create the perfect storm in the lake, and it didn't stop there. So this is a animation that's going to show you from January to December for 2 consecutive years. Keep in mind this is 1996 and 1997, but it gives you the idea a little bit better of what's happening. So dark blue is the best oxygen and red is no oxygen. Picture the dam on the right from 0 to 200 feet, and as you go up the lake it's going to get shallower, right? So kind of think of this wedge up here, the upper end of the White River. So you'll see through January everything's pretty good. March, April, no thermocline really setting up yet. Right there, so starting about June we start to get that thermocline setting up in the upper portions of the lake. So what you can see, you've got good oxygen here, decent oxygen here, and no oxygen in the middle. That's why the fish started dying in the upper end of the lake sooner than the rest of it. Kind of watch what happens to this wedge of oxygenated water. You get this layer of anoxic water. This is September, October. And what you see on the right, down there at 140 foot, is that getting pulled through the dam. Then you're left with no oxygen from really 20 foot all the way down to the bottom. Lake turns over in December, things get better. And this equates to what happens in Taneycomo as well. Now we're going through another year, 1997. Try to pause it in there. Oh, darn it. Anyway, but you get the idea. So typically, you know, you wouldn't have oxygen down here to support much life, but some years you do. The more generation that they pull through the dam, the faster it's going to deplete. So last year, that's why we lost oxygen starting around September. It's a terrible DO year in Taneycomo too. And because there was no oxygen down at the bottom of the lake for so long, that's what caused all that water quality problems at that depth that was feeding our hatchery and feeding the lake last winter.
Shane, how did you get your readings?
Beg your pardon?
How'd you get your readings?
These readings?
Yeah.
This was made by the guy with the USGS, and I don't know how he got these readings, to be honest with you. It was in the 90s, but he wrote up a really good report, hydrodynamics of Table Rock Lake. I can email it to you. I've got it electronic. It's a good report, but it talks about this. But then he built this animation a few years ago that really helps understand how that works and why. I'm not sure where he took the readings, if they were going out. They had some, I think they had like a vertical system of DO probes mounted somewhere, which is what I'd like to get installed in the lake too. Then we could see, you know, when the lake's getting ready to turn over, we would be a little more prepared for it here in the hatchery and in the lake. So I've kind of been working, we've got a committee formed, the White River Dissolved Oxygen Committee, and we kind of deal with these issues in the lake, or at least try to find ways to cope with the issues in the lake.
Using that torpedo, huh? Using that torpedo?
Well, we haven't used it yet. What I was thinking about trying to get would be some sort of a real-time sensor that we could mount somewhere at the dam that would give us from 0 to 200 foot. Then you can see as that thermocline sinks in the winter when things are gonna start getting better on Taneycomo.
How much do these sensors cost?
How much do?
What it cost? Or what are they?
Probably 50 to 60,000 is one of them that he was looking at.
Now, how many you need to do on the whole lake?
Well, I wouldn't need to do it in the whole lake necessarily. We could just mount it at the dam, and then we could get an idea of when the lake's about to turn over there. That's when they do the DO profiles every month. The USGS does that and gives it to the Corps. They do that down at the dam. So that could be quite a bit different. You see on this animation, you know, the upper end of the white starts turning over a lot quicker than down the lake, and you lose oxygen a lot quicker up there.
Is that funded by the state, Missouri Department of Conservation, that
Well,
sensor?
I don't, no, that's not. That's USGS that does the DO profiles, but that's kind of up in the air. We haven't really talked about it. It's just
So
looking at some ideas.
How you fund it in order to get that, right?
We haven't talked about that in our group yet, but we would. Probably would be shared by the Corps, maybe Southwest Power, MDC. You know, those are all the entities that are involved in this DO committee. Yeah. And this is another graph from the Corps. It's kind of messy, but reverse what you were looking at now. Now this is the dam from 0 to 100 foot or 200 foot, and this is your DO from 0 to, you know, whatever. The blue line is June, so you can see, you know, good oxygen all the way throughout. Really start, the purple and the black are ones to focus on. You see thermocline set up. The purple was in August, about 20 foot, and you had no oxygen. But there's your little dip, your little piece that's getting pulled through the dam. So by end of October, you know, we had no oxygen here. This red line is just flatlined at 0, and that's, according to the Corps of Engineers at Little Rock, that's never happened. They've never seen 0 readings all the way from 20 foot down to the bottom. So it's quite an anomaly. So let's talk about why it happened. Everybody knows where Cape Fair is on James River Arm. That's what it looked like in July of 2015. All that stuff's got to decompose somehow. So the bacteria that are in the water are going to decompose that. When they do it, they're going to use up oxygen. You combine that use of oxygen with them pulling all that deep oxygen out through the dam, you're going to come up with some anoxic conditions pretty fast down at the bottom. So what happens when they run out of oxygen, these bacteria still have to break it down, so they start pulling oxygen from other sources. Nitrates, sulfates, and carbon dioxide are always occurring down there in the bottom of the lake. So these bacteria start pulling oxygen from them. Nitrates turn into nitrogen gas, which we had feeding our hatchery in November, December. Sulfates turn into hydrogen sulfide, give you that rotten egg smell, which we had down here. And then carbon dioxide then goes to methane. All very, very highly toxic to all fish, specifically trout. So with no oxygen down there at the bottom of the lake for 3-4 months out of the summer, all this gases are starting to build up, and that's what we had coming through the dam at 140 feet right before the lake turned over. And just another graph to show you, kind of demonstrate this. 3 to 4 parts per million fish are not going to be found in those areas. Get all the way down to 0, talks about hydrogen sulfide building up. So just another, there's a lot of literature on it.
So right now the Lake Taneycomo is at 2 parts per million. So if you look at that chart right there, that's not very good.
No, it's at 2 parts per million when they're not generating water, yeah.
Yeah.
When they generate, of course, they get flushes of oxygenated water because the Corps can inject oxygen or they can vent the turbines. So yeah, that's why the outlets are such good places to fish when the water's off. We've got, what, 8 coming out of the hatchery
At
outlets?
least, yeah.
Parts per million, so. Really probably the hatchery is what saves Taneycomo during a lot of these DO years. I mean, we're pumping all that oxygenated water after the fish use it here in the hatchery into the lake. So Clint's gonna take over from here and talk about the fish loss. You know why it happened, kind of give you a little bit more details of exactly what happened, how much, and how we dealt with it, so.
All right.
Fun stuff, we really like rehashing this.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna talk a little bit what happened this past November. Shane done a good job explaining about the anaerobic bacteria, breaking down that organic material which created those gases which entered our facility. It started on a Sunday. We had been smelling, so let me go back a little bit. So every year, prior to lake turnover, we always smell like a rotten egg smell for a few days. We have low oxygen around 0 for around a month. But 2015 was different because our 0 was over 2, almost 3 months around 0. So when you have that extended period, like Shane was saying, of that anoxic water, that's when that anaerobic bacteria took over and created those gases, and that's why we had something that's never happened in this facility since it was built in 58, 59. Flood years are always bad for the hatchery too, because we have that influx of organic material, and also when they're generating water, they're pulling the limnion levels of the lake down. So when they generate constantly for a month, Shane was saying, pulling that layer of water out, you're also bringing the warm layers down. And warmer water can't retain oxygen like cold water can for very long. So when you have a summer flood, which is unusual, your water's even warmer up here that they're pulling down. So that's why another reason why there was just no oxygen from, was it 20 to 100 foot, or 100 some foot. So anyway, started on a Sunday. We started getting reports from Point Royale asking if we were doing something wrong. They were smelling this rotten egg smell and thought we were doing something. I could smell it at my house here at the hatchery. I could smell it off 165. A little unusual, but like I said, we smell it every year, but not for very long. So I got a call on Sunday. It said all the fish in the visitor center are dead, and that in the tank, the aquarium back here, so all those big fish were dead. Well, that was concerning, and we had some oxygen issues, some fish kills due to some oxygen issues, so I didn't know what was going on in the tank because we can't inject oxygen in there, so I didn't really know his water quality yet. So I come and we had some issues with 2 or 3 different tanks were dying. I cranked up the oxygen. By the next day, most all the rainbows in the upper facility were dying. I was 100% certain that his water quality then, to combat those gases, we can use liquid oxygen, so all of them were turned to their highest setting. And if you ever seen the head boxes on those tanks out there, that breaks up the water as well. Made a call to different warm water hatcheries to bring aerators to even further break up the water. Our best water was at the brown trout facility, which is usually our worst water because it's reused. But by the time it went through all these tanks and went through the drum filters and got to the brown trout facility, to those low head oxygenators, it was broke up and dissipated enough, those fish weren't even affected down at the brown trout. So I had empty tanks down there. So we moved a lot of our fish from up here to those tanks. Well, I didn't have enough room for all of them, so I started calling other facilities, and we moved to other facilities as well. It almost wiped out the whole initial rearing in the back, or we call it the back room. That's where eggs, fry, and fingerling are. So I switched all those to well water, because well water doesn't have those issues coming from the ground. Switched all the little fish outside the well water, and we stopped the death there. It was an everyday thing. It lasted 3 days. When we done our water testing, I sent samples off to test for the gases, And to, one thing I did was methane. I'm pretty sure we had a methane issue too. But nitrogen, as you can see, toxicity for trout, 104% saturation. Our levels were 125%. That creates a lot of problems like gas bubble disease, pops their eyes out. Hydrogen sulfide, the main culprit, as you can see, 0.0087 parts per million is toxic. We had readings of 0.4, which is a tremendous load of hydrogen sulfide. And if you're ever out at the raceways, if you look on 2 different sets of raceways, you see that the bird cages are yellow. That's from that hydrogen sulfide. When we were using the aerators, it was shooting water into those bird cages. And then when we got done, we noticed a yellow tint, and that was from that hydrogen sulfide. Permanent stain. Permanent reminder of what happened, actually. We almost had a total loss. We were gonna have a total loss on our brood stock. Well, that's our future. That's future Taneycomo. That's future of, you know, we cater to the 4 trout parks. They rely on us for fish and fingerlings. So they were priority 1. They were the first fish that we moved, was our brood stock, to save them. And I talked a little bit that all could be traced back to the summer flood. So I had staff all over the state come here and help. I couldn't keep up with it. We had to pick up dead fish every day, just so if your fish die and then they get against the screen, the water level rises, equalizes your pool, and you could kill them all. So from morning to dark, we had literally morning, first daylight to dark. We were picking up dead fish, moving fish, transferring fish to other hatcheries. I received a lot of help, and I couldn't have done it without them. We done some stocking too. I forgot to mention that. Besides, we have so many fish in these 100-foot raceways that you can't just put them in empty pools and take them to other facilities. You're still going to run out of space. So we stocked some fish. We stocked 54,000 brown trout. No. We transferred 54,000 brown trout. Rainbow trout were transferred to Montauk and Bennett. 62,000 10-inch fish were stocked in Lake Taneycomo. So we just done some, like a November, December stocking. Was it November, December, and part of January? Stocking just to get those fish out in the stream and get them away from these conditions. And I talked about the well water with frying fingerlings. But despite all that, we met all of our stocking for the year, and we have rebounded. I don't know if I talked about that. That's the staining I'm talking about. See the yellow on the head box, on the concrete? That's from the hydrogen sulfide. That's a picture from Bennett Spring. We transferred those brown trout to Bennett Spring, and that's what died. That looks like a lot. It always looks like way more than what it is. That was out of 7,000. I think that was 400 or 500 or something like that. So we rebounded. We got eggs from federal sources. Well, let me talk about this first. I'm sorry. We decided to do a reduction statewide in 2016 as a result of what happened to us and Bennett Spring. Bennett Spring experienced a December flood, which the Niagara backed into their hatchery, and they had a lot of fish escape that way. Not a lot of death, but a lot of fish went out into the Niagara. We decided to go, instead of 225 fish per tag in the parks, we went down to 2. And Taneycomo was going to get 581,000 instead of 700,000. And I decided to spread that out throughout the year so it would be less impactful, trying to get the biggest fish that we could each month so there would be less impact to the fishery and anglers. Is this part of yours? Oh, sorry. So what I want to talk about, we've rebounded. We got eggs from federal sources. We worked with other hatcheries. We worked as a system. Montauk was able to provide some fish to us to fill some gaps. We utilized well water for way longer than we ever had before to speed up growth. The warmer the water, the quicker you can grow trout. So to fill that gap, that void, we lost a lot of our fish were 5 to 6 inches. We had to speed up the ones behind it to try to fill that gap. And so that's what we did. And, you know, I'm happy to say that I had a managers meeting this past Tuesday, and we're going back to 225 next year in the trout parks, and we're going back to full stocking in Taneycomo. And that's, I mean, it's really remarkable how all the hatcheries pulled together and we rebounded from this situation that's never happened before. I hope it never happens again. So, is there anything else you wanted to talk about for questions? Okay, sorry, I'll give it back to Shane.
I'll just,
Can I ask just one, okay?
Yeah.
So with the hatchery, that was really, you guys did a great job. We lost a whole bunch of fish, but what about, you know, with those hydrogen sulfide levels going into the hatchery, that same thing happened with Taneycomo. So to assume that no fish died in Taneycomo, you know, they don't float like the bass, you know, on Table Rock. They sink to the bottom and they just float by it. With that kind of a, you had to assume that we lost some fish on Taneycomo. So, and with those kind of levels, couldn't it have been really bad?
You know, and Shane has some of that, but Taneycomo isn't a consolidated raceway with a high capacity of fish in a small area. They're spread out. That stuff dissipates as you get down the lake. Fish are smart. They're going to get away from it. They can't get away from it in my raceways.
Yeah, okay.
But they can get away from it in Taneycomo the best they can. I don't know if you have anything to add.
yeah, no, you're right. And, you know, Clint talked about from the upper end of the hatchery here down to the brown trout facility, all that had dissipated out by the time it got there. Well, you know, the same distance on Taneycomo, if you think, by the time it got down there. We're not denying that any fish died in Taneycomo. I didn't quantify how many, but we know there was dead fish. There's no question about it. But as severe, it wasn't as severe here because they weren't trapped in certain locations. They can get away from it. And I mean, looking at this year's sampling data from a population perspective, I don't see where we had any big losses. You know, that's going to affect the overall population. You know, there was definitely fish died, there's no doubt. But
my second question is, okay, since that happened, you know, when something like this is going to happen, it happens quick. And you guys last year didn't have the capability to do the water testing, to know what was happening when it happened. Are you going to be able to get that capability in the future so that, you know, we're going to have the same thing happen again?
I hope not. It didn't happen in 60 years, but it can.
You know,
But to answer your question, we have an auxiliary spillway line, and it's at 30 feet deep. You're not gonna have those issues that you're gonna have. And if I was able to switch to that last time, we wouldn't have been talking about this. Now I can. It wasn't done yet back then. So that was done in part of, I would have better oxygen during low oxygen time of year, and I would have warmer water to speed up growth. That's why it was built. And as an emergency situations, our intake is clogged over these flood years with catfish. Had to hire a diver, clean it off, and that's a mess. But the auxiliary is going to enable us to switch these fish over and prevent this from happening. The only way I see it happening again is if we had the perfect storm like we had last year. We've had floods in the spring. It doesn't happen. We didn't have this happen with that. It's those summer floods, different type of organic material than you have in the spring. More fertilizer, you have a lot more stuff. So not to say it can't. Hey, I said that way it would never happen again. We had 11.
We had a December flood too.
We did have a December flood.
December flood we ever had.
right.
Never.
Yeah, but you always got that oxygenation or the decaying or the lowered oxygen. What he's trying to get at is, are you gonna try to get that so you can monitor that closer, whatever?
We do. We can monitor the hydrogen sulfide. Now we have a meter for that. We have it for the nitrogen and the hydrogen sulfide, so we can monitor both those aspects.
In-house before you
That's
send
right.
it out, right?
We can What now? In my hatchery?
Yeah, well, I thought, my understanding was he had to send the water to Kansas City or something? When you were having the fish kill, you know, in November, you didn't have the capability to know what the nitrogen level was or the hydrogen sulfide level in-house.
I didn't, not hydrogen sulfide.
Okay. Okay.
We have a saturometer for nitrogen, but I wanted to test for other gases and stuff too. That's why we sent it off. So we sent it to Springfield, it wasn't Kansas City. We deal with KSI Labs. When we do our DNR water quality, we gotta abide by certain standards, so we utilize that lab for different water quality stuff. But yeah, we do have the capability in-house for nitrogen and hydrogen sulfide. So we changed a little bit the way we monitor. We've always monitored DO every day during low DO because we have to adjust our liquid oxygen levels, and we always look at temperature. I mean, that's never changed, but if there's ever a question anymore, we're ready to test for that and possibly switch to the auxiliary if we ever had to. We're better equipped now.
And I think you probably aren't gonna, I don't hesitate to say that, but I doubt that we'll see what we saw last year, this year, because so much of it depends on that generation. You know, once the thermocline sets up in Table Rock, you've got a finite amount of oxygen down there at 140 foot. When it's gone, it's gone. This year, there's still oxygen there, you know, in September. Even 2 parts per million, that's more than we had last year this time. So if there is oxygen there, that means those bacteria are still decaying that stuff, not pulling oxygen from the others, creating the hydrogen sulfide and the nitrogen. So I think this year would be more like a normal year, it seems, if whatever normal is these days. And the other good thing is, like he said, at 40 foot now, he can pull water from the auxiliary spillway. So if this ever starts to happen again, as soon as he gets the first reading that it looks like it's going to, that's probably gonna happen in November. Well, at 40 foot, our water temperature is below 70 in November. So you can just switch to that one, pull it into the hatchery, and avoid this again. So we were about a month out from completion on that other auxiliary water line when this happened. So, sorry, you had a question, sir.
You just answered.
Okay.
I was gonna ask you what the temperature was of the water coming out of the auxiliary system.
Yeah, so you can see that on the Corps of Engineers webpage. You know, they do every month DO profiles and temperature profiles. So I didn't put it up on these graphs, but yeah, by November, that thermocline that was at 20 foot has sunk to probably 60, 70 foot. So you've got good oxygen and stratiform temperatures all the way down to 70 foot. So it starts to happen again. We'll have an alternate way to get rid of that, or get around that, at least in the hatchery. So, you know, just some good news, bad news, and we'll open it up to questions if y'all want to stick around. I saw a slight reduction in catch rates below Fall Creek, probably due to stocking less fish. We said it's a put and take fishery, you know. 55 fish an hour versus 91 fish an hour last year. The good news, comparable catch rates in the whole trophy area, really throughout the whole sampling zone. 243 fish an hour is what we caught this year compared to 265 fish per hour last year. So that, when we're talking about a population level impact, I really don't think, you know, any fish that died in Taneycomo had a level impact on the whole population, whatever would have happened last year.
EF means electrofishing.
Yeah, this is electrofishing, yeah, sorry. And we catch rates, catch per unit effort, that's fish per hour, that's how we measure our success. So when I say size structure, the percentage of fish over 16 inches has improved since last year. As you would expect, you have fewer fish, you have more food to go around. The fish are gonna get bigger, they're gonna grow more, they're gonna get fatter. So 24% of the fish we sampled were over 16 inches this year versus just 13% over 16 inches last year. And I'd like to hear from you all too. If you've been out fishing this year, from the folks I've talked to, fishing's been very good for sizes and numbers of fish. I put May, but that's before we knew we were going to resume normal commitment in 2016. Just to bring some of this together, reduced stocking may contribute to larger fish with minimal impacts to angler catch rates. Don't think that I'm gonna always stock 580,000. This would be something, if we ever went to a stocking reduction, we would run it by all the anglers, everybody, to see, just like with the slot limit Phil was talking about, how TU was involved. We'd love to work with this local chapter as much as possible on everything. You all are out there much more than I am. I want to hear your input of what's going on, you know, and I'll give you all my number and Clint's number. But if we were to reduce stocking, I think we could achieve a lot more growth on our rainbow trout in Taneycomo. I think we could get bigger fish, fatter fish, because it's just a basic law of fisheries management. The more fish you stock, the more mouths there are to feed, the less food availability there is. We are going to start a creel survey next year, next January, and that'll run for 2 years. So we'll be talking to you guys a lot more out on the water. Some of the things I want to ask is get some angler input. Would anyone support that? Do you want to catch the same amount of fish or slightly fewer fish but have larger fish? Or is everybody fine with catching, you know, 10, 11-inch fish on average below Fall Creek? So things to think about. Nothing we're going to change without consulting everybody. And but based on the results of our sampling surveys this year, it just brings to mind some questions that, hey, this lake might be capable of a lot more, you know, growing bigger and better fish if we want to try to go that route. So normal stocking for next year. More good news, these are last year's fish. Got to brag on those a little bit. Always end the slideshow with good pictures. So here's our contact information. We're not hard to find. We're both officed here at the hatchery, but jot it down, email us, call us. Any questions or concerns you have. You know, we want the same things you all do. We want minimal impacts during our low DO season. We want the best, biggest fish out there, the most fish for you all to catch. So let's work together. You know, let's see what we can do to work together to accomplish these things. Yes, sir.
In Montana, they were stocking, and then they stopped stocking because they felt it was hurting the wild fish, because that's what you mentioned. And they have very healthy fish now, large fish. I know it's heresy, but what if they decided to stop stocking hatchery fish and let the wild fish reproduce on its own? I mean, economically, I understand what would be a disaster for Branson and for Phil, but...
Well, I don't, while there is probably some reproduction going on in Taneycomo, we saw that this year. We caught some trout this big, electrofishing, more actually than we've ever seen before, probably because of last year's high water. But there's not enough to sustain a fishery, I think.
Not enough what?
Trout, natural reproduction of trout to sustain the fishery that Taneycomo receives. You know, 500,000 to 600,000 fishing trips a year. I mean, you know, it's our state's largest trout fishery. So, yeah, sure, if we stop stocking, those fish would get really big, but there wouldn't be the numbers to catch. You know.
Yeah, well, it's an economic thing.
What?
It becomes economic.
Oh yeah, sure it does.
But you are going to try, you know, letting fish stocking less, so less mouths to feed, you say, and maybe bigger fish.
We could try it. I'm not saying we're going to. You know, we stocked less this year. It was a good way. I've kind of wondered this since I got here. You look at the data and you look at the body condition of fish and the years that we stocked 600,000, which has happened several times before for whatever reason. In our hatchery system, we lost fish. You see the relative weights go up. You see size structure go up. So, you know, makes you wonder, you know, could you have bigger fish with, and if nobody's catch rates have suffered this year, I think, well, here's another way to put it. Our creel survey, 200,000 rainbow trout are harvested a year. We stock 700,000, so there's a lot of carryover there. Granted, there's some natural mortality, but at some point, you saw that graph, you know, we're going to hit a capacity, you know, the fish size structure starts going down. Things to think about, you know, and we'll get more creel data from the next couple of years, see what our harvest is again, see what anglers would support and want to see. And my motto, I want to do what the anglers want. I mean, we should be managing for you all. That's what we're here to do. What you all want to see caught out there, you know, within reason. That's what we want to do. So why manage for something that nobody wants to fish for. Yes, sir.
What did you do with all the dead fish that you removed from the raceways and in other places? Did you grind them up and use them for fertilizer, or just give them to the raccoons?
That's a good question. So when you have a tremendous influx of dead fish, what do you do with them? That's a great question. There's a couple things you can do with dead fish. Three different things that we do here at the hatchery. Two mainly. We freeze them, and then we do grind them up for Chesapeake Hatchery. They use them for their catfish broodstock. But when you're talking thousands and thousands in 3 days, you don't have a freezer capacity. So you got to start composting. So we have a lot of composting boxes, but still not enough room. So then you got to bury them. And so that's what we did with a lot of them, was bury them and compost them. So freezer was full in the first hour. So it was a lot of, and we didn't know how long it was going to last. So we were going to get a backhoe and dig a big hole. But yeah, we buried and composted almost all of them.
I read somewhere, and I don't remember whether it was online or in the newspaper, and it's been over 6 months ago, something about the Corps of Engineers. Well, no, let me back up. I think it was Rockaway Beach was trying to get the Corps of Engineers to do some dredging. And I don't remember whether it was to fill something in or to make it deeper. What do you know about that?
We got down on our knees and begged.
I do, but Shane's a better person to talk about dredging.
It would be dredging it to make it deeper. It's so shallow, you know, you've got that point that sticks out there with that wing dike, more or less. So as the water's flowing with all that sediment, you know, you saw the pictures of, that sediment's coming through, suspended in the water through Table Rock Dam, from Bull Creek, from all the other tributaries. Water drops out, you know, it's flowing down, it kind of goes in these eddies and it drops out that sediment. Well, Lake Taneycomo is 100 years old, so a lot of the spots in front of those boat docks there at Rockaway Beach is only a foot, you know, maybe less when they're not generating. So we'd be looking at dredging over there, and I think the Corps wouldn't have opposition to that. I don't know a lot about that project. I've not been directly involved with it, but I know there's some talk of it. Sounds like you might have a little bit of insight into it.
One of the major problems got solved here recently is we have all that grass and that crap down there. They found out that the sewer plant there in Rockaway is dumping it out into the lake, causing the problems with a lot of that grass. So that would be good for something for TU.
Yeah, that would be a good thing to get behind.
You said the Corps doesn't have any problem with it, but do you have any problem with it?
Not down there. You know, they used to dredge a lot. What was it?
Gravel gritty.
Yeah, used to dredge a lot. We kind of put more stringent regulations on that above Fall Creek, simply because that's where the invertebrates live. You know, in the gravel above Fall Creek, above the 65 bridge, all that gravel is inhabited by the invertebrates that are a primary food source of trout. You get down to Rockaway Beach, you get into more a typical older, aging warm water reservoir that it's silt. You know, the invertebrates aren't inhabiting that stuff. So I don't have any heartburn with it. MDC doesn't have any heartburn with it, but we will get to review those permits and take a look. And it's kind of been our stance to deny any dredging operations above Highway 65 because of removal of gravel could be harmful. But below it, no, it's something that needs done. Unfortunately, it's going to be very costly, and it's still kind of up in the air where those funds are going to come from. Yes.
You talked about doing what the fishermen wanted to do as far as stocking rates and things. Has there been any discussion, or will there be discussion in the future about maybe putting out a survey to the fishermen as far as what they want to see, more fish at a lighter weight, or less fish at a heavier weight, or
so if
something in
you're
between?
fishing,
That's what the creel would be.
yeah. So when I say creel survey, let me clarify. That's we'll get checkers out there on the water to actually interview you while you're fishing. That starts next January, and it'll run for 2 years throughout the year, 2017 through 2018. I'm going to add some questions onto that creel to get at those, just like what you said. Would you rather see, you know, fewer larger fish? Would you rather catch maybe a few less fish, catch larger fish? And try to get some input that way. If we need to, you know, we might put something online or maybe a mail out survey. You know, this wouldn't be something that we would just decide in-house and do. It doesn't work that way on these big reservoirs, especially ones in the public eye like this. Phil could probably tell you about the slot limit and how difficult that was to pass, but I think it was a 6 or 7 year project to look at changing that, you know, exactly what we needed to stock. So yeah, we'll be out there. You'll be talking to us in the next couple of years if you're out. Yes?
Has there been any settling of boulders that you put out there with the heavy water that we've had? And how much?
Well, I think they're just getting buried in gravel. You know, I don't know that they're moving much.
I was thinking more about moving down.
Have they moved?
Yeah.
Do you guys think they've moved?
Not moved downstream, moving down.
Oh. You don't think they're getting buried?
Yeah, sinking.
You don't think they're getting buried?
Not as visible.
Well, it would stand to reason some of those gravel bars wouldn't be very consolidated, you know, they'd probably be pretty loose and who knows how deep. You know, we've seen gravel bars on James River or some of the other rivers that are 10, 12 foot deep, you know, just loose gravel, especially after this last flood. My goodness, there's gravel, you know, I had banks that we did stabilization work with landowners on, and the banks were as tall as this room, and now you can walk up the gravel to the top of them, so. Yeah, whether they're getting buried with more gravel coming in or they're sinking, that's very possible. Removal of that gravel, you know, could it be done? Yeah. Would it be costly? Yeah. Would it be a permanent fix? No. You know, and that's the problem. You take the gravel out, one, you're causing problems because you're removing the invertebrates, and two, you know, that's not a permanent fix. The next few years of big floods, it's gonna find gravel from the shoreline and wash it back in, you know.
Do bank stabilization.
Well, I think that's.
So,
We could definitely look into that. I mean, we can definitely look into that stuff. Well, exactly, yeah.
well, what do you do with the money the Conservation Department gets from the citizens of Missouri?
We
You know, I mean,
stock
it's money. You gotta put it
700,000
someplace.
rainbows.
Well, okay, so, but if the fishery, you know, if the banks are deteriorating, you know, I mean, that's just infrastructure that you know is going bad. What do you need to happen for the bubble to burst to make a decision to do something?
Taneycomo's a little more difficult because we don't own Lake Taneycomo.
Nope.
On the lakes or streams that we own, well, we don't own streams, but any smaller MDC lakes that we own, we can do whatever we want to with, and we can use those funds for. Lake Taneycomo's not ours. Our job is to manage for the fishery. That's all our job is on Lake Taneycomo. That's all the Corps' given us to do. We manage the fishery. You saw the catch rates. The fishery as a whole, as a population, looks great. Could we do, I mean, we could definitely partner with groups like TU. We could partner with the Corps, Southwest Power, but keep in mind, anything that happens on that lake doesn't happen at this level or at my level or even MDC's. I mean, it has to happen in Congress. You know, anything to be done to these tailwaters, these hydropower reservoirs or dams, that's got to go through an act of Congress to get done. So it's not a quick process. It's not an easy process, but there may be ways to get there.
To put in those rocks, did that go through Congress?
No.
No, okay, just.
We got a permit through the Corps of Engineers to do it though.
So, you know, what you're saying about Congress is, that's the
Well, I'm
standard
thinking more
line
along the
that-
lines of like minimum flow. You know, changing any allocation of water from Table Rock or through Table Rock Dam. Those big issues go through Congress.
Yeah.
Small shoreline stabilization projects here and there, no, we could probably get a permit to do that, but we're gonna have to get funding to do that. And I don't know that that's something MDC would appropriate funds towards, since it's not something that we, you know, it's not something that's gonna benefit the fish directly. It might benefit decreasing the amount of gravel coming in. You see what I'm saying? I mean, the gravel boulders increase fish habitat. That's something that increases fish for fishermen to catch. And, but no, I mean, if it needs done, you know, we can sure look into it.
You see what, sorry.
No, yeah, I mean, no, it's a valid question, but just to be clear, you know, it's not always our decision or our money that can be spent, you know, it has to be appropriated through everywhere else too.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
You're welcome. contact info, give us a call, swing by, we'd love to talk to you all.
Shane, there was a lot of data on those slides you showed
Yeah.
earlier in your presentation. Is there a way you could, share?
I can, the report I sent you?
Yeah.
I forwarded it to Phil, cause it's the only email address I know, and I know he puts it up on Ozark Anglers for everybody to see, but, yeah, I summarized all that from this year, and we've got data going back to 1993 in tables. You can see exactly what's happened with fish populations, see those changes in 97 going up like we were talking about. So yeah, he can email it out to you all. Do you have their emails?
I have a PDF file, I can upload it to Ozark Anglers, but, links on all social medias. I post it every year. I did not post it even though I had it until after this meeting on purpose, cause I knew you guys were gonna see this for the first time.
But here's my email. If you just shoot me an email, I'll be happy to send it to you. Every report, all that information is public knowledge, so we'll sure be happy to share it.
Can you control the, put signs up, like no wake zone? Along the lake, you can do that?
No, would that be?
That's, water patrol.
Yes.
I just wanna thank you guys for giving all those brown trout to, Bennett Springs area. They released them into Niagara and walking up the Spring Creek, and the fishing was wonderful this last week.
Those-
Thanks, guys. You done good.
Yeah, those were all because of the November event,
Yeah.
and
Like Mother
most
Nature.
of them got washed out into the stream. But yeah, that's what those were fish from here.
Good.
But all the brown trout come from here anyway. But those were only there because we had to move them. So yeah.
Let us know if you're gonna do it again.
Hopefully we won't
I
have
have
to do
one
that
thing
again.
to say. I know you guys don't have jurisdiction over it, but somebody needs to come up, like the conservation department, and check some of these people for power bait, night crawlers, and I pulled a fish trap out of, down there by them rocks today, and it's up on the shelter. I stuck it in the
Really?
deal, it's stuck in the top of the shoulders and stuff. People, we've got people coming in here, keeping fish, mind your own business, that kind of stuff.
There's no way they're under
They're
12.
taking out here like crazy.
Hey, I've got telephone numbers for almost all the game wards around here, as well as that, I forgot now, it's the wildlife, hotline.
I was gonna say, Operation Game Thief is printed on your fishing
I
license,
can
that
put
number.
Quentin's
Yeah,
phone number on
yeah.
the Facebook
But
page.
you call him, he's clear to heck and God north of
Right.
Springfield, and he hasn't got time to get here, and he won't be here.
What I do
Yeah.
is, I'll call the hatchery, or I'll call the office here, and if it's during the hours, they'll send someone down to talk to them. Now, they can't do a lot except just put the fear of God in them and just say, he's got the uniform on.
And a lot of them know that. They do what they want to anyway.
Well,
Yeah, and it's
take pictures, do what you can. I mean, that's what I do, is just take pictures of them, say,
I've
I've got,
license plates and pictures of them carrying fish and everything else out.
If it's a recurring problem and the same people, definitely document that stuff, and that's how they can make a case on it, cause we have 2 agents for Taney County, they gotta cover all Taney County,
Why can't they get one here full time?
They have 2 here
Yeah.
full time.
well, he means
I'd
just
probably end up
here.
getting a ticket, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good question.
yeah. But most agents, throughout the state, they got a whole county to cover, just one of them, and that's tough. When you got a whole county to cover, yeah, something's going on down here, but you're busting somebody doing something on the other end of the county. But if it is a reoccurring problem, yeah, we can do something about that.
Documentation that Phil mentioned is that if you can get enough documentation and contact either the enforcement division of the Southwest region or your local guy, and let them know that you had 75 observations of things in the last month, then maybe they'll say, no, maybe we gotta spend a little more time here. It's just not.
And they would.
guaranteed, but It's
They
something,
would.
it's information that they have, and maybe they'll be able to.
Yeah.
Besides that, you'll make a buddy out of the game warden. That was a joke, okay. Remember that.
Yeah, I know they could spend full time out there.
Oh, yeah.
They told me that, it's just.
Try-
don't have the
I
resources.
see it all the time.
Trout parks have the same thing. I worked at a trout park. Could be a full-time agent every day down at a trout park, definitely. But
But that couldn't
What, would that what?
I mean,
To put on more agents, they have to come up with the money somewhere. Would they pull that, say, out of your?
not here directly.
How would that?
No, see, what we have, the commission approved so many positions within the department, we can't go above that. So it'd be adding positions, which we haven't done, for a long time. So if we done it, it would have to be when some positions became vacant, you don't fill those, and then you make more agents. So, you know, and I've went through that process before, and it's not fun. We lost a person at the hatchery. They wanted a different position. I had an opening when I first got here. They didn't fill it, and then created a different position. And it really hurt us for a while. It was during the 08 flood when I needed people. So yeah, that's what would have to happen, because we can only have so many employees in the department.
Well, one thing that we ought to all do is keep track of what's going on in our state legislature, because we've got a lot of, I'm struggling for the word, we have a lot of legislators who are not our friends.
You're correct.
And, for instance, I go on the Conservation Federation Missouri website, they have a legal page there, and they try to keep track of it. There's one time I saw that, and then I went on the House page and saw that they had made amendments to the thing, so it drastically changed the bill. And I sent an email to Brandon
Butler.
Yeah, Brandon Butler. And I said, hey, you need to change the wording here because you got it incorrect now. It's better, it's still not good, but you want to be saying the right things on your webpage. And I also went on, geez, I can't remember the name of it now. Something that was, it was a different kind of conservation website. It was more like, instead of a Trout Unlimited type thing, it was more like a touchy-feely type site. I don't remember the name of it. And nothing, if you're touchy-feely, that's fine. But at any rate, it was in much more detail for what they were doing. And I actually had a congressman who would return my emails. My senator won't, but my congressman will. And we carried on quite this long conversation about all these things. He keeps me up to date with those things. So it's worth our time out here in this, sitting down here, to keep track of that stuff and send emails and letters to congressmen. And that's the way things work.
Yeah, agreed. Let them hear your voice, because there's a lot of bills out there, if you look on the Federation side, that are very anti-conservation. It's very unfortunate, but they can be let known by email and voting too. You know, hey, I'm not going to support you if you're going to be, you know, proposing all these bills against what I love to do, or the outdoors. So yeah, it's a good point.
Okay, guys, thanks for coming. Got another meeting next month.